What's up, vintage lovers? Welcome to the Vintage Aquarium. I'm your host, Kate, a writer and storyteller with a passion for all things vintage. Each week, I'll talk with other sellers and collectors about their vintage passions too. We'll share tips and resources, and together, discover the stories and history behind our favorite items. It's time, so let's dive in. All right, welcome everybody to the Vintage Podcast. This is episode 2. I'm so glad that you're here joining us. Today I have the pleasure of speaking with Brenda Shea. She's a curator of wonderful vintage items, a vintage seller. She sells in person and on Etsy. Her Etsy shop name is Rhodes Reserve, and her tagline is Vintage for the Modern Home. So I'll tell you a little bit about her background. Brenda loves to curate an eclectic mix of vintage goods in her shop. With a background in interior design, photography, and small business management, it only felt right for her to make the leap to full-time selling. She recently relocated to Santa Fe, New Mexico, where she enjoys exploring the Southwest, hiking with her husband and dog, volunteering at the local animal shelter, and of course, sourcing new vintage goods for her loyal buyers. So welcome, Brenda. Thanks so much for being with us today. I really appreciate it.
Hi, I'm so excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So can you tell us a little bit about when you first became interested in selling vintage?
Yeah, so I think like a lot of vintage sellers, it's kind of just like been in our blood. There probably something sparked at childhood. I've always loved looking through like old photos. If I remember at like a new family member's house or something, love to pull out photo books and like hear stories. But I think I started like thrifting probably more in high school, college. Definitely remember furnishing some college apartments with just like, whatever the weirdest thing you could find, or, if you needed cheap furniture. Yeah, and then I kind of got more serious when I was planning my wedding. I very much wanted to go, not necessarily like the DIY, but definitely like I was creative. I wanted to let my personality shine through with our props and like how we decorated it. So we made a lot of stuff, but I also sourced a lot of vintage pieces. We did like a little spot with like a photo vignette that had like a chair and a table and like some cute props and like a phone, and so people could like take their own photos. All my centerpieces were vintage tins, so like cracker tins, cookie tins, like all kinds. Me and my best friend actually sourced by hand a lot of our florals too, so we were running around Detroit. Major props to her. She was like all into it and did an amazing job. But my favorite were sweet peas. She like literally was like on the side of the highway like pulling up florals. So it was like awesome because I feel like the florals kind of, just because we were picking them, we got to do a lot more with them. So yeah, kind of like a wildflower, like eclectic look. Yeah, so like kind of vintage look. We got married at the Flynn Pavilion on Belle Isle in Detroit, which is it's like a 1950s building that was originally like it's on an inland lake, but they used to ice skate on the lake. So it was kind of like where you could get your hot cocoa and like rent your skis and stuff. So it was a very like mid-century looking building. So we kind of went with the look of that. Yeah,
and
very
then nostalgic.
Pretty much. Yeah, it was like super fun. And my dress, actually, my best friend altered my dress, but it was a vintage dress that actually had the same like pattern as my mother's, which I was like totally like a weird kind of coincidence, but it like felt right. So she like took that in for me and like added like cat sleeves, and so yeah, everything was kind of like a mix of repurposing vintage, handmade, and I just had like the best time just pulling it all together. Like I just felt like, okay, like I love this so much. I debated for a moment like doing like props for weddings, but I think that wasn't totally my jam. So I ended up opening my Etsy shop about a year later, and I ended up selling a lot of those vintage tins, some of the props that weren't my personal items. So that was really cool just to kind of source what I needed, use it for my purpose, and then send it off into the world for someone else to love it and use it. Yeah.
So you were already you already got to feel that whole circle of repurposing. Yeah, that's really neat. So you started selling on Etsy at that point in time. And then I think you also mentioned to me at one point that you were working with some other people to try and help them. So it sounds like you have a little bit more of like a business background, which I think is really interesting as far as that. Can you like talk a little bit about that too?
Yeah. So throughout college and then after, I went to school for interior design photography. Always have been a photographer. Learned it in high school, like in a dark room, old school. Like if anyone, has an opportunity to learn that way, I think it's really valuable. But yeah, so kind of working through college, I worked for a few small businesses who were either, well, for the most part, they were like handmade makers who in their small business, and they were on Etsy. So I had an opportunity to help run that side of the business, to do all the online sales, also wholesale. Etsy used to have a wholesale program. I would do customer service, the shipping, kind of everything. So yeah, and I did that for probably about, I don't know, 6-7 years. So I was very familiar with working at Etsy. I really love the platform. I think the fact that you can create your own brand and look within this bigger marketplace, I think is really cool, especially for creatives. So it definitely obviously lends itself to handmade and creative people, but also for vintage, I really loved that I was able to create a brand essentially out of things that I wasn't even making.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah.
Well, I think there's a lot to unpack here because some people don't even realize that Etsy has sort of like two, like they have one platform for selling, but they have sort of two different types of sellers. Like one of the types of sellers is handmade goods, which it sounds like you worked in that area. And then also there's the vintage items. So, but the background of it, the back end of it kind of works the same, right? Where you have to create a brand for your company. You have to set up your store with your items and then describe your items. You have to photograph your items, which obviously that's something that you have a strength in. And and then after that, you have to like Etsy puts them out on their platform, but you can still do other things to try to promote your items as well, like even outside of Etsy. So it sounds like you had a lot of like really great background and you were like really ready when you went to set up your own shop.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it just felt like a natural progression. I was like, I feel like I'm almost an Etsy expert because I've been on it. I don't know exactly when the platform came out, but yeah, I was on it in 2009 working in the back end. And yeah, I just really loved that. It's just really fun. And I don't know, I love like shipping too. So I feel like I've never been scared to like ship breakables or fragile items. I think I'm weird in that way that most people don't like to ship, but I think it's very, I don't know, it like relaxes me. I think I put on a good podcast and I just get my ship on, I guess.
Yeah, I totally get that. I don't have much fear about shipping breakables either, but I know a lot of people do, and it prevents people from shipping breakables. And so that's, I don't know, that's kind of a niche, I guess. That's a strength for sure, if you don't mind shipping breakables.
Yeah.
So I wanted to ask you a little bit about like what vintage for the modern home means for you. Like what kinds of items do you like to source and sell, and how does that fit into maybe your design style or the style that you have for like the brand of your shop that you're talking about, your shop brand? What would that be like?
Yeah, so I remember coming up with Vintage for the Modern Home, I think well before I opened the shop. I'm always kind of like ideas person and had planned it out well before I, opened the shop. But I remember I was like on a flight and it just like hit me and I got really excited. I was like, okay, Vintage for the Modern Home, like that's it. That's what I want to create. And I kind of like based on this like I guess philosophy of mine that I think every home deserves a balance between old and new. Obviously, we live in modern times. We need modern things. We need things to function. But I think just adding in vintage and especially eclectic, I think can just add just a different like vibe. I think I don't know, the home I owned in Michigan, it was 100 years old, and I just was like, it just needed things from the past to fill it up, to make it a home. I think homes feel more lived in with vintage pieces, especially furniture. And I think there's a lot of functionality in vintage pieces still too. Like one of my favorites is glassware. All my glassware is vintage. I just love, I don't know, I feel like it's better made. Furniture, I feel like it's better made. So higher quality. And there's just, I think a lot more fun to be had in buying old things.
Are there any particular eras or styles that you're really interested in? Like when you say eclectic, I mean, do you go across the board or do you gravitate towards maybe like a specific time period?
Yeah, so I love mid-century modern, but I also love, I mean, I guess eclectic to me, kind of the first thing I think of is like very like 60s, 70s, like mixing colors and patterns, textures, plants. I love plants. Yeah. So kind of, I guess I'd say like maybe like 50s through like 70s is kind of like where I like to stick. But I have a lot of love for I don't know, when people can mix in even like older, more antique in with even that style. I think it can just be done in a really nice way. I definitely appreciate like full on maximalism, just for like walls or plaster with everything. That's not like my personal jam. I also just moved across the country, so I got rid of a lot of stuff. But yeah, I definitely like am drawn to that. But then I think I also kind of love minimalism. Like I feel like even my background is a little bit like it's like a minimal maximalist. Like it's clean, everything has a place, but there's still like a lot going on. And I think this house in Santa Fe, I'm definitely going more for like I rent, so I can't paint the walls, but it's more of like a brighter kind of airy look. My home in Michigan, I really like lean into kind of like a moody, kind of darker look. So I think like all of it, and I think changing it up frequently is great too. Yeah, so I think I don't know, and then even like 80s and 90s, I think that there are definitely some things from those eras that you can pull in and mix in. So I guess when I say eclectic, I really do mean like a little bit of everything. Totally.
Right. So let's talk about where you source your inventory from, since we're kind of on that topic. So you were in Michigan, now you're in Santa Fe. How does that compare? And do you have the same kind of sources available to you in both places?
No, I don't. But it's okay. Yeah, Michigan, I think anyone who is familiar, Midwest, East Coast, I feel like there's just like a lot more to be found. Michigan, I had the suburbs. I live close to Detroit, but pretty much if I drove north for like an hour, I would hit, I'd have a full day of thrifting in me. Here, I'm like Santa Fe is like a little mountain town. Not little, but it's a mountain town. There's not many thrift stores. Lots of consignment, but it's higher end. And estate sales are definitely not as flush as they were in Michigan. So Albuquerque's an hour away. There's a lot more to be had down there. So I probably go down there once a month, couple times a month to source. But for the most part, I've been not sourcing as much, which actually feels really good. Kind of part of like moving away was to kind of regroup, kind of slow down a little bit. And I think it's all been working. It feels good. But yeah, the estate sales here though are really amazing. A lot of art collections, like sometimes I'll walk in and I'm just like, this is like a mini museum. Each room has like a different category of art, lots of folk art, lots more Southwest style, which is very new to me, and it's very exciting. I love that I'm just opened up to just new culture, new visuals, just a lot more to learn. So yeah, that's been really cool. I do miss Michigan thrifting, but sometimes it's like you don't need to fill a cart. You don't need to fill a car full when, you know, and then have it become your dust pile, which I know a lot of resellers all have that dust pile. So
Sure.
I've been very on top of it actually. For the most part, everything I have is listed, which like feels amazing. Yeah.
Wow, that's fantastic. That you're caught up on your death file, that you don't have one.
Yeah,
That's so
for the most part.
Yeah.
I mean, there's like many death files, of course, but
That's so great. So so that's really interesting. And I do notice that, like, if I go on a trip or something, and I go to try to source, that it can be really different in different cities. And I also think right now, interestingly, I mean, there's a lot of discussion about how there just really isn't that much in the thrift stores and stuff to find. Like, they're getting picked through, or I don't know, nobody really knows why. If there are more people out there who are sourcing, especially since the pandemic, because there are a lot more people that have their own stores. And then also I kind of wonder if people aren't donating as much. And so I don't know, I don't know about locally, but like the national tax law changed so that, you kind of have a minimum, like a higher minimum deduction. And so for a lot of people, when they're donating, they were taking that deduction, and now they're not getting the deduction, or it doesn't, really count. They're not donating enough for it to matter. So I'm wondering about that. And then I'm also noticing that a lot more people are trying to sell things themselves rather than just, donating them. So it really changes like the landscape of what's available out there. And so, that's not really exactly what's happening to you, but from moving from one place to the other, you're experiencing something similar. So, what have you had to do to kind of deal with that? Where you're not finding the things that you normally would source? How are you working through that?
Yeah, so, and I will say also, me and my husband, we travel a lot, we road trip a lot. So I always source when I'm traveling, and sometimes I feel like I don't know, like I'll walk into a place I've never been before, and I'm like, oh, no one in this town is like sourcing what I've been looking for. So I feel like it's just like sitting there like waiting for me. It's probably not true, but I get excited like, oh, it's just been sitting in this town until I wait or till I show up. I don't know. But yeah, I think there's a lot of patience, being more open-minded. I think I've kind of tried to change my mindset into kind of that slow down. I don't have to be in a rush to get all the things at once. I think I used to be like, I would go, drive north and hit as many stores as I can, and I wouldn't come back till the car was full. And now I'm like, I'm more comfortable with walking in the store and just buying one thing. That's very like strange for me, but I am, I'm just learning to kind of be more picky too. And I think that's good when you're trying to create a brand. It's like you don't want to buy everything and just have your shop full of whatever. I also try to source things that for the most part that I would keep in my home. So like higher quality, and yeah, just things that kind of fit into the style that I've curated, and then I've curating, just you know, it evolves over time, but
yeah, well, your tagline can, I mean, for the modern home, that evolves over time too, right? Like what is considered modern, what's considered popular style, and things like that too. So
yeah.
so are thrift stores the main place that you generally get your inventory or have gotten it from?
Yeah, yeah, thrift stores. I'll do a little bit of antique malls, depending. I feel like in general those have gotten more expensive too, but I'm like antique malls are the place where like things go to die. Sometimes it just feels like that. Like I mean, there's definitely like really good ones that are like have good turnover, but some of them, you know, you walk in, you're just like, are there even people in here? Like, what's going on?
Yeah.
So sometimes I feel like those ones, I don't even know what I'm thinking. I think I was like I don't know, it was like when we were moving down here, I don't know where I was, but I went into a place and yeah, I was just like, okay, a lot of the stuff is like very covered in like thick dust, like, but it's like good stuff. And I think it's always good when the tag is like so old that you can barely read like the handwriting on it, and you're like, this has got to be like 5 years it's sat here, like at least, like I don't
Yeah.
know.
And a little tip, like,
Yeah,
do you ever try to negotiate when you go into the antique malls? Because sometimes they'll call the dealer and get you a little better price.
yeah, yeah. I do love when the dealer is there. Yeah, I think especially like if I'm buying a lot of stuff, like
Mhm.
yeah, I've gotten some good haggles for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's really cool. So, okay. So since you're in Santa Fe, maybe we can talk just for a few minutes about like, so you said that now that just things that you're really interested in sourcing now. So you said art was one of them. That's new. Is there anything else that's kind of, really started to catch your attention?
Yes, I love studio pottery. Lots of pottery in Santa Fe. I actually just finished up a wheel throwing ceramics class myself. Learned a lot about myself. Learned learned that I need to be more patient, for sure. But yeah, I started collecting a lot more of that personally. I've always loved handmade mugs. Uh, so I think kind of part of that was like, I'm gonna go learn how this is made, and it's difficult. But yeah, so I'm excited for like spring and summer estate sales here, especially to find studio pottery. I think on one of the Etsy trends, I think that was like noted as something that was gaining popularity. So it's cool. Sometimes it's marked and you can figure out who the artist is. Sometimes it's not, and I'm kind of good with either. Even if it's like student pottery, I think it's just all very interesting. Different glazes, different shapes. Some of it's functional, some of it's just decorative. Yeah, so that's kind of like piqued my interest since being here. I found some in Michigan, the Midwest, but there's a lot more down here.
Yeah, you are in like the pottery mecca in the
Yeah.
Southwest. You're so lucky. It's awesome.
Yeah.
So that's really cool. All right. Well, I wanted to kind of like switch gears a little bit because since I have you on here and I heard a rumor that you have a little bit of a history in rehabbing Coach purses, I would love to pick your brain for a few minutes about that process. So how did you, I know this is like a total switch of topics, but I really
Yeah.
like I really want to give our listeners the opportunity to learn a little bit from you since you have this like special area of knowledge. And hopefully we can have you back to talk about some other things in the future too. But
Yeah.
So as far as purses go, I'd love to know a little bit about like, how did you get interested in rehabbing leather purses, and maybe why, you know, Coach in particular.
Yeah, so I don't remember exactly like when it started. I think just like a friend kind of got me interested in Coach. I started to find them a lot. I know this was probably back when I first started, 2017, 18 maybe. And I actually remember, so a lot of them like wouldn't be cleaned, or, you know, at the time I didn't know. I was just like, I've never been like a purse person. So I didn't know. And I was like, do I just sell this as is? Like, do I try to clean this? Like, what do I do? And I definitely got, you know, some people are being like, throw it up on that, like, you know, eBay or Etsy, and, you know, it'll sell. And I was like, but I think if I clean it, it'll be worth more. So I definitely wormholed into that research. There is a ton of information out there on cleaning Coach, rehabbing Coach, etc. So yeah, I watched YouTube videos. I don't Well, yeah, Reels wouldn't have existed on Instagram at the time, and was TikTok a thing back then? I don't even know. But now there's like, you know, all of that everywhere you look.
Yeah.
And of course, if you click on one video, you're gonna get fed a million. But yeah, I think so. I must have been on YouTube and just like, you know, Googling as many articles and things as I could. So yeah, and again, I like to sell things that I would keep. So I started wearing Coach. I think just in general, it's a timeless look, very classic, really great quality. And I'm talking about the leather unlined, so mostly, you know, 70s to a little early 2000s, but I guess for the most part, like 80s and 90s bags. More of my research, I guess, was into like identifying, learning like the style names, how to identify if it's real. And you know, we all buy fakes. We all buy fakes that we think are real, and that's how we learn. So it's, you know, it's good to have that happen, and yeah, and kind of to learn what the markers are.
So there's a lot of misinformation out there, right?
Yeah,
and you spent many years learning.
Yes, and I'm still learning. It's definitely, you know, there's like kind of rule markers you can go by, but also exceptions and nuanced things. But yeah, so basically I started cleaning them. I think it's like shipping, where it's like you have this item, it becomes like a therapeutic little project, put on a podcast, and yeah, so I can go into kind of like my process if you want, or
yeah, that would be great. I would love it if you could explain your process. And I totally feel you on cleaning things, because I love, you know, taking something that's old and dirty, and maybe you didn't even realize, like that's one of the magical things I think about thrifting for vintage or finding vintage things, is that in your mind you can see the possibility of it. You can see what it's going to be like, what it would be like, or what it used to be like, and you can bring it back to life. So I mean, it sounds like with purses or leather, there are a lot more steps to it than something like washing a piece of glass. So yeah, maybe you can just like walk us through a few steps on how you do that.
I get a lot of questions about the dunk method, and there's tons of videos, people showing you how to do it.
So what's the dunk method?
The dunk method is literally dunking your leather bag in water, you know, using like a dish soap or whatever, to let it soak through, and that's how you clean it.
It sounds terrifying.
So it's terrifying. It's also very controversial. There's like Coach purists who are like, no, never. Not gonna lie, I've done it. I think I've changed my mind on it though throughout the years. Because at first that was the information I was getting fed on the internet. That's how you clean a Coach, you know. It is absolutely not always necessary. I would say if you're keeping a bag for yourself, hell yeah, do whatever you want to it. I mean, it's your bag, you know. If you're reselling though, I think it's really important to, I don't know, at least for me, like, you know, stay true to the bag, and these bags they age, they patina, and it can turn the bag into a very beautiful worn bag, which I think can be highly sought after. I think, you know, people want things that are new and shiny and perfect and beautiful. I think just know when you're buying vintage, it's not always going to happen. Sure, you're going to find a bag that's never been worn, never used. That's amazing. And I do love that. But I think it's just kind of be aware, you know, this bag is from however many years ago. It's seen some stuff, you know. And I think that's okay. That adds character. I think that, I don't know, I think that's really cool. So personally, the ones I carry, they do have wear, there's scratches, there's marks, and I'm totally good with that. If I have a couple that are like nicer that I won't carry as much, but like my dailies, definitely, they look like, you know, daily bags. But yeah, so the dunk method, yeah, I think proceed with caution. It can definitely create, like, mold is a big issue with other bags. People resell bags that just have obvious mold all over them. It's
Wow.
horrifying. I think they just don't know. So I think that's one thing. Some of the older bags are also reinforced with cardboard, so dunking will disintegrate that reinforcement, which you don't want to do. You're going to ruin a bag. Also, I've like read things about like even just where's your water coming from? It kind of damages the bag. I don't know if I'm like gonna read into things that much, but you know, the type of soap. Anyways, I'll move on to what my actual.
So what are some other
Sorry.
options? That's okay. Yeah, no, this is really helpful information. But like, so so one method is to completely submerge it in water and then sort of scrub it and wash it. I've seen that on YouTube as well. But if you don't want to do that, or you're not comfortable with it, or you want to try an alternative method, like what are some other ways that you can get that leather clean? Like one of the things that I've noticed is that sometimes you might have like a water spot on it, or the patina might be uneven in certain areas and stuff. And like, that would be something that I wouldn't really know what to do with.
Yeah. And I'm trying to think, I do feel like in the past, actually, for water spots, actually getting it completely re-wet and drying it does work. But yeah, if you don't want to go that route, for the exterior, some products that I really like are the Lexol cleaner, or just like a saddle soap, like a mild saddle soap. I like Kiwi brand. So those are good options to just get any dust, dirt, like a good overall clean. There's also brand CPR leather. It's a leather cleaner and conditioner. That one is really great too. So yeah, you can go over the bag with that, just like follow directions with whatever product you're using. Usually like a microfiber cloth or like a microfiber like sponge is a good tool for that. And then on the inside, you can always do like a thorough vacuum with like a attachment, really get in there. You could wipe with like a damp cloth, like I would use them with like a texture, like an old rag or something, like dishcloth, just to kind of get in there. Q-tips are great for pockets, crevices. But yeah, I think
great idea.
Put a little work into it. Like I think it's very rewarding to like thoroughly clean something. And yeah, and then like I think having for like the suede interior, there's suede brush and erasers that are very helpful, or like a horsehair brush to kind of even clean that through. So yeah, that's kind of where I would start. And then again, there's like so much information. Like if you have a specific stain, I tend to kind of shy away from bags that are like heavily damaged or need stains or like have holes or, you know, tears. I've done like a pad of like dye work, not like a whole bag, but maybe like minor corners of the piping is just like faded more. That can be an option. It's just important to make sure you seal it. I've definitely had bags in the past that I have dunked and just the dye, I'm like, okay, this bag has been re-dyed because it just all comes out. So yeah, I think yeah, just
That's
like a good, what's that?
something you wouldn't even know. That's something you wouldn't even know until you got it wet, and then you saw what the
Right.
what the results were.
Yeah, like I've had like, I mean, it was like black dye, but it kind of like can look purple in the water, and I'm just like, why is all the water turning purple? But that feels good to me to kind of get that out and more restore it to its like authentic look. So yeah.
So from a seller perspective, I mean, Coach, thanks for these tips, because these are great tips. I really think that they're useful, especially that you name some products and stuff that people can use. Because I wouldn't even know where to start, with it. But
yeah, there's a lot, especially just leather cleaner in general, so many products. But I know these ones are what I use, and I'm in a few like Facebook coach groups too, and all those are highly recommended.
That's great. That's fantastic. So as far as rehabbing things, I mean, we all know how that it's good for the environment. It keeps things out of the landfill. There are some things that sometimes they need just a little bit of TLC. But from a seller standpoint, like, how do you feel that putting that attention into cleaning something or rehabbing it, I mean, does it increase the value of the bag? Are there other results? Like, I wonder if it helps something sell faster. Like, what do you think?
Yeah, I definitely think that a clean, well-maintained floor bag will definitely sell for higher than the ones that are, beat up. So yeah, there's definitely added value in knowing what you're doing from like a seller standpoint. And I think just, I mean, it feels good, I don't know, to like, fix something up, clean it up and send it back into the world where maybe someone who isn't familiar or doesn't know how to clean or rehab would just pass it by. And like, I think in general, my standpoint on being a reseller is that we're trying to keep things out of the landfill. Cleaning a bag can definitely increase value. I think people also do things that could be considered rehabbing that may like decrease value. I've seen a lot of like bags, maybe they're too far gone too, but like painted on or like things added on. Personally, that's not my style, but I think there's a lot of different, aspects of what you can do with bags. And even if, they're too far gone, it's like, I'm sure there's people out there who will use the leather to make like jewelry or other things. So I think that it just depends, like, what avenue you want to go down. That's like, everything can be like used to, infinity and beyond.
Yeah, in different ways.
Yeah.
In different ways. So I know.
Yeah.
I remember my dad would always save the leather from his shoes, from his old shoes and stuff when they were like completely worn out. And one of his favorite things would be to like line the bottom of things. So he would put like on the bottom of your chair legs to keep them from scratching on the floor, or that like an old belt, he would keep it for, that kind of stuff or whatever. And so I always thought that was always very inspirational to me, because not only did it show that like you didn't need to go out and buy something when you had something in your house, maybe that you could use for that, but also just the idea of creatively repurposing things, kind of like trying to come up with creative ideas for how can I, solve this problem. Like, like you can go out and you can buy felt pieces to go underneath of your chairs that someone invented specifically for that purpose, or you could, use what you have around the house and give it another purpose, even though it can't be used anymore for, what it was. Like they're completely worn out. So, but yeah, I mean, I love those ideas. I like the creative repurposing. So
yeah, it's being creative, it's being thrifty, it's being scrappy, like all the things. I think overall that just it feels good to do what you can. And I don't know, sometimes when you're like creative and think of a weird idea, you're like, I'm a genius. Like it's very rewarding, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, well, thanks for sharing your ideas with us. So I think that's really helpful about the purses, and I'm sure that can be applied to other leather items as well. And so, but do your research. That's what you're saying. Do your research. There's a lot of misinformation out there.
Educate yourself.
Talk to somebody who knows what they're doing. Those are all good things.
Yeah, and there's a lot of coach Facebook groups you can join. I've found that the community is very helpful. People want to help. No one's expecting everyone to be an expert, but I think it's just, better to ask the questions. So then, and you can share the information with other people.
That's so great about the reseller community in general, I think. And collectors, vintage lovers, all the things that we fall under. So, all right. Well, do you want to answer a few like fun questions before we get off?
Sure.
All right. So let's see. These are just kind of like easygoing questions. So current obsession, what would your current obsession be?
I think it's gonna be studio pottery. I think I just finished that class, and I have my really sad pieces that I made, and I know how hard it is to create. So I think I'm a little in awe of studio pottery, just as a category in general.
That's awesome. I can't wait to see what you find and put in your store. Okay.
Me too.
How about your best find? What do you think your best find ever might be?
My best find. I feel like there's so many, and like it's just across like a million categories, of course. But I think for Coach, since we were talking about that, one of my favorites was it's called the Barclay tote, and it was British tan, like perfect condition. It's basically like a kind of like an overnight bag, like it's that big. And I think just I don't know, it was like exciting just to find like the bigger style, and I feel like they're a little harder to come by. So that one was cool. I kept it for a while and then eventually sold it, but
that's pretty awesome. I think when you find one of those things that you're always looking for, then you want to keep it for a little bit. At least I do. I like to keep it for a little bit, and then I'm ready to let it go. That's cool.
I was like, I'll see if I use it, and then I didn't. So I was like, I'm not going to use it because I don't want to mess it up. So
okay. If I had a nickel for every blank I saw in the thrift store, is there anything that you see in the thrift store all the time that you're like, what the like it's everywhere?
I feel like just sad, lonely, basic clear glassware.
Oh,
like singles too, which I've started to collect some singles. I really love actually clear glassware if it's like etched or has a unique shape. But I think the sad like IKEA or like whatever, just basic stuff. There's too much of it floating around.
We need to come up with some kind of good use for clear single glassware. Maybe a single glassware dating club or something.
Yeah.
try to find their matches.
There is a Facebook group. I think it's mostly mid-century glassware, but it is like singles to like either sell one off or like if you're like I'm looking for that replacement. But yeah, it exists.
Oh, I love it. Oh my gosh, that's so cool. I gotta find that. I gotta look that up because
Yeah, I think
sometimes
it
you
might
do.
be like wayward. Yeah, like wayward barware or like mid-century wayward, something like that. It's like funny. I don't know, but yeah, I love it.
That's so great. Sometimes you do, you just find that one little guy and you know that he needs a friend. So,
Yeah.
okay. So maybe, so I was wondering if maybe you had some tips on like some vintage items that you think make great gifts. I always think about this with Etsy sellers because a lot of times we go in there, we shop for things that ourselves, but like we don't really know what like I think sometimes there's sort of a thing like, do you want to buy something used as a gift for someone else, right? I mean, that's
Yes.
always a question in my mind. So I'm like, okay, well, I want to do that, but what would be, do you have any suggestions for good gifts that you think that would be something particularly, on Etsy, since those curated things, or maybe a collection, I don't know, whatever you think.
Yeah, absolutely. I love this question. Because I love like I want to see more people gifting vintage, for sure. But I'd say my top go-to would be a set of barware or interesting wine glasses, and then pair it with, if your friend is a wine drinker, pair it with a bottle of wine or a mocktail mix or whatever spirit they're into. I think that's that kind of, vintage and modern. You can pair something vintage with something brand new. Personally, I love to be gifted consumables also. So like food, drink, candles, I love it. So yeah, I think that's a good option. And just in terms of style, colors, shapes, sizes, barware, it's literally endless. And I think, or even like a coffee mug, a fun, weird vintage coffee mug with like their favorite brand of coffee, or like a gift card to their favorite coffee shop, like something like that, kind of create a
Right.
little package or something. And then I think planters are great. I also love getting plants for gifts. So, yeah, I think also again, like the possibilities of vintage planters is endless. There's brass, ceramic, different shapes, sizes, colors, all of it. Yeah, I'd say those are my top two. Because I think it can be kind of general, but then, depending on maybe what you add to it is more personal, depending on like how well you know the person. Yeah.
Yeah, so true. Oh my gosh, that's so great. Yeah, and you're combining your new and your old, and I love the idea of planters. I'm so into vintage planters right now and new plants. So, and plants are a really affordable gift. And if you get like a beautiful older planter, and then plants also have significant meanings. I mean, you can choose something that's meaningful or something that's going to be uh easier to grow or more personal for a specific person. So and then just plant it into a vintage planter, and there you go. So awesome.
Yeah.
Those are
Yeah.
great ideas. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
And thank you so much for being on today. This has been like my pleasure. I so appreciate you, and I think you have a wonderful shop, and I love seeing all the things that you're bringing out there to people and rescuing from the landfill.
Yes.
That's amazing. So let's if you want to share with everybody how they can get a hold of you, where they can find you, your socials, your shop, etc.
Yeah. And first of all, thank you so much for having me on. That was a blast.
Awesome.
I don't get to talk about vintage like too much, so it's such a treat to be able to,
Yeah, I could talk about it all day long.
Yes, always. So yeah, you can find me. My Instagram is Rhodes Reserve, RHODES Reserve. And then I'm always open to emails if anyone has questions about anything coach or you know, anything else you'd want to know, or if you need advice or anything. I love that. I love talking vintage. I'd say the best way to like communicate would be my email, which is rhodesreserve@gmail.com. I'm on TikTok, but it's very sad and not really going anywhere. So yeah. And then my Etsy shop, of course, is it's just Rhodes Reserve on Etsy.
Okay, awesome. And I'm gonna put all the details in the show notes, so everybody has those as well, along with your social and information and all of that stuff, and a link to your Etsy shop, so that way everybody can be able to find you. So, all right.
Yay.
Well, thank you. And I guess we'll sign off now. Take a look at the Vintage Aquarium on Instagram. It's at Vintage Aquarium. And also, I'm going to put a link down here where you can sign up for our newsletter. So that way you can stay in the know as to when the next episodes are going to be dropping. So hit the like button, the subscribe button, all the good things. That just helps us be able to reach more people.